Welcome to the She Can't Quit podcast. I'm Britt Jensen, a business and marketing strategist, multi-passionate entrepreneur, and a mom of 3. I fell into the entrepreneurial world by chance, and from that day on, I never looked back. Nearly a decade later, 2 businesses, and a lot of life in between, I found a love for sharing my journey, and I've made it a mission to share about the life of raising businesses and babies, from the messy moments behind the scenes to the magic happening in between. Grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine while we chat all things marketing, business, and motherhood. Because you know that vision you have is something you just can't quit. Hey there, I'm Britt, and I'm so excited that you're back for episode 2 of the She Can't Quit podcast. If you haven't listened to episode 1, I highly suggest you go back and do that so you can kind of get an understanding of how this all started and get a little insight into my entrepreneurial journey and how it was all kind of a mistake and an accident and I fell right into it. But anyway, if you're coming over from episode 1, I am giving you the questions and the roadmap to ask yourself of how to find your place in the entrepreneurial world. And this really gets me excited. I love talking with clients about this, whether it's a new business idea or just people who've reached out to me over on Instagram. If you are not connected with me over there, please do over at the Britt Jensen. I love to chit chat and hear from you guys, especially what you want to hear and see over on all of my content channels. I wanted to get started today with breaking it down and creating a roadmap. And if you stick with me to the end, I have something for you that will make this all 10 times easier. We're going to break it down into kind of different sections. And if you think back to like grade school of the like Venn diagram where everything connects, this is what we're going to do. So the first thing that you're going to break down and make a list of is, what do you love to do? Whether that is, maybe it's creating content, maybe you love getting in front of video, maybe it's writing, whatever that is. Write it down, and then I want you to go through that list and see what is something that's a skill that people you notice say, oh, you're really great at that, or what is something that's kind of more of a hobby that you just enjoy doing. I know someone, a really dear friend of mine, who always got complimented. Her handwriting is beautiful, and she actually started as a calligrapher. Funny enough, too, after she was a mom, stepped into the entrepreneurial world, and now she is a wedding invitation designer and is phenomenal, like amazing. I totally had forgotten where she had started years ago, and I loved it because it was so aligned with her. And I always remember people saying, oh my gosh, your handwriting is so pretty. So she always got asked to do everything back in college, back in our sorority days. And it's so interesting to see how that panned out. So if think of kind of things that people are like, oh, like you're so great at that, or I love, maybe you're a great painter, maybe you're a great organizer, and have maybe thought about opening up an organization business. So think about things like that. The next thing I want you to think of, this especially for my mamas out there, what do you have time for? Maybe you can't take on something that's in person or like doing consults, whether it is something in marketing, or maybe it is something like going to people's houses and organizing. Maybe you do not have the time this season to do that. But maybe you do have time to work in the background and can do some administration assistant. Maybe you can be a VA. What do you have time for? Maybe you can work, at nap time or later, or maybe it's working on, something crafty during nap time or after bedtime. So think about what you have time for. The next I want you to think about is, what have you felt inspired by? Don't get confused with falling into the trap of being like, well, I saw someone else do this and they were really successful. They can be successful at it because their mission and their vision is aligned with that. But if you try to do it, it's not going to be the same way if it doesn't have that same passion and that vision behind it. So I want you to think about what you're more pulled towards. What do you feel really is who you are? And you're like, wow, I actually really enjoy doing that. And so I want you to keep an eye out and be very aware of what you feel inspired by lately. Maybe it's photography. Maybe you just notice yourself finding so much joy in taking photos, whether that's with your kiddos or maybe it's branding photos. You never know where you're going to start, where you're going to end. Not that I think the entrepreneurial world ever actually ends. I do think about that all the time, and it really boggles my mind. Anywho, going on to the next question. Stepping into market research. And this is one of the most valuable skills I think that you can learn early on as an entrepreneur and as a business owner. If you kind of have narrowed down that list of what you're inspired by, your skills are, and what you're good at, and what you have time for. If you kind of narrow down a couple ideas, then I want you to go and do some market research. And I want you to look in that niche, in that market specifically, and see what you love about that niche. What do you love that people are doing? Maybe it's a certain trend. Maybe it's a certain style of things. Maybe it's just kind of the whole package deal entirely, and keep note of that, make a note of that. And notice what's really working for them. Take a look at what people are saying. Take a look at if you're their ideal audience. So maybe it's like family photography, and people are doing this behind the scenes look, and the storytelling so big and going to be a huge thing. If you haven't already picked it up already in 2023, it is going to be huge for storytelling. So stay tuned. We'll be doing some content on that. But what is really working for them? What are people loving? What is really sticking in that niche? And think about that. And then I want you to kind of take a step back and think about what is missing and how can you kind of do it differently? How can you create, and this is what they'll say, this is the gap. This is your UVP, your unique value proposition. This is where you feel that you're going to serve the people who are not being served already in that niche. Okay, so let's say that you want to create a digital planner. I know those were huge last year. So let's go with that example. And maybe you see all these digital planners. There's a lot of student copies. There's a lot of, day to day, but maybe there's certain things that you see, or maybe it's the fact that you're seeing that people who are trying to do it all aren't being served. And maybe it's moms. Maybe it's moms you want to specify, and you want to be able to add in their, school drop off, and maybe taking some time for mom and creating a self-care aspect in there. Things like that. And you're understanding that there is, you go down the digital product world, there's so much. But if you see a gap where people aren't being served, that is your point. And if that's what kind of lights you up and you kind of get that pull in your gut, that's what you're going to go for. So maybe it's creating a digital planner for moms to do it all. That is going to be your UVP. That is going to be where you will find that space that's not being served and have your solution right there. Now it's going to come down to more of the business side. And this is going to be where you think about what can you invest in it. And not only we talked about time earlier, but what can you invest in it financially right now? So if you're not in a space where you can invest financially in a lot of things, that's okay. There's a lot of things that are so many business ideas that are way under. And a lot of that can be just marketing yourself. Maybe you want to be a copywriter. Start an Instagram page, start creating a portfolio, start marketing yourself and putting yourself out there for some freelance gigs. And figuring out how, to do that. A lot of things are not as hard and as complicated as we try to make it. I think a lot of that is fear holding us back. Maybe it's creating, if you have like an iPad, creating digital art. That is such a huge place in the digital world. Digital products are there's a huge space that's not talked about. So maybe it's niching down in there. Think about what you can invest to it right now. You don't have to, I know a lot of people want to do boutiques and whatnot. There are a lot of ways to start smaller. There's a lot of research out there on YouTube and on the internet, and so many ways that it's not as hard as we think. So think about your budget and what you can invest in it now and go from there. So when you align yourself, you're going to find this space between what you love, what you're good at, what you're skilled at, and what you really feel inspired by. Find your couple things. Keep narrowing down the list to go look and do the market research. What are you finding is really working for people, and where is that gap where you can serve people? And then come down to figure out what can you invest in that dream right now, and just how can you get started. So for example, a lot of people think to get started on YouTube, you need fancy cameras and whatnot, but honestly, most everyone has a smartphone and can get started there. And I really want to say this, and that you have to be okay with being bad when you get started to be good, to then be really great. There's a whole psychological thing behind it where there's this gap where we stop ourselves because we want to be up here. This is where we envision our heads and where we're actually at. But we realize that we start working our way through, but then the gap keeps getting bigger. And that's okay, because we have to be okay with being bad and we have to be okay with learning, because otherwise we're never going to get from point A to point B. And that's okay, because it's going to keep continuing. So I'm going to share a couple things with you after you find your space, a couple things with you I want you to be aware of when you are creating this and kind of mapping out a plan. And like I said, so many of these plans of mine have started out on a Post-it note or literally taking a piece of printer paper and mapping it out. And that's how my business ideas have come up. Or I drive my husband crazy telling him all the things at night, after the kids go to bed. And I'm like, I have to get it out to somebody because it's stuck in my head. So they start small, but they get really big. And I promise they're really worth it. So a few things I want you to be aware of as you are mapping this out is keeping and holding yourself back because you're afraid to fail. And not only afraid of failing, because like I said, if you listen to the first episode, I do not believe in failure. I think it's a tool to tell us what's not working and how to readjust and keep going. Failure is needed. We need that. We need to figure out how to kind of fine tune and figure out what journey we're on. That's okay. Don't be afraid of failure. But there are also people, and I am one included, who's afraid of success. I'm afraid of trying to handle it all and juggle it all. But that's okay too, because we also figure it out, because in action, as we take more action, we find clarity. So don't be afraid of finding those answers along the way. Don't be afraid of failing. Don't be afraid of actually finding success and making it happen, because you'll figure out what's next. I promise. It's not as scary as you think. Second thing is perfectionism. Perfectionism held me back for a long time, which is how it took so long to record the first episodes that will never be aired of this podcast. They're lost to the abyss somewhere in cyber world. But it took me a long time because I had this vision and idea in my head of what I wanted to look like, what I wanted to sound like. But honestly, I'm so glad it did. Through those few months, I just let it go. And I said, I don't care. I'm just going to do it, because those, honestly, I feel like the more raw and real and authentic, that's where it's at for me. That's what I love listening to. That's where I serve and do my best for my clients, for my community. And that's really wanted to put it all out for you guys too. I just really think at the end of the day, do not hold yourself back. If you have this thought, if you have this idea in your head, just go for it. This vision wasn't given to you by accident. It was given to you on purpose. So like I said, if you stuck around to the end, I do have something for you. I'm going to be dropping it down in the show notes or in the box below if you're watching on YouTube. It's going to be a little roadmap with all these questions on here that we went over today so that you can brainstorm, you can get it all out, and you can kind of work through and get your idea if that is what's on the list. Obviously, if you're listening to this episode, you already know that you have a space in the entrepreneurial journey. It's just kind of finding that space in the entrepreneurial world and understanding what that is. So if you click the link below, you'll get that PDF and be able to map it all out. And of course, please, please, please tag me at the Britt Jensen. Can't wait to see all of you working out your ideas. If you love the podcast so far, please leave a review below. If you're watching on YouTube, please share below. If you're working on your business idea, if you have some ideas or anything that you would love me to cover in content here, I absolutely love to hear and create around that. And today, I'm so grateful that you guys are here. I'm so excited to be able to create in this space. It's, like I said, a long dream coming, and it's so exciting. And I just feel so good about it. And I'm so grateful for each and every one of you here. I hope you know that I am always cheering you on every step of the way, and I'll see you next time.